as you can see, they make a bit of noise about the whole thing. This little girl here, Misha, is actually the more dominant of the whole lot. She's, although she's the smallest, she is the more aggressive. And if out of anyone here today, if I am going to be bitten, it is by her. More or less fairly soon actually, if I don't get the food out for her. She gets quite impatient in her old age. So all of these guys here in the park are fairly old. They're at least 6 years of age. Now in the wild they only live to a maximum of 6, so they're all very much past it. But our guys, because they don't have to run around in search of food as much, there's not quite as much stress on them, they tend to live quite a bit longer. So they can live up to about 7 or 8. So they still don't breed past 5 or 6, but they do they do live that bit longer. So what we do, guys, is that we'll bring out a bit of meat for them so they can have a bit of a munch. So it is a bit of the wallaby meat today, so if anyone is a bit squeamish, I do suggest looking away. But it's not too gross today, is it? Hungry. You're always hungry, kid. Do you want this big bit? I didn't think this was for you, but you can.
Oh, God, look at that.
No, we won't give you that bit, will we? We'll give you this bit. Got some younger kids that'll enjoy that big a bit better. These guys, because they're that bit older, need more meat than the bones. So they have this bit of meat, guys. They will eat the entire thing. They'll eat the fur, the bones, absolutely all of it. They won't leave anything to waste. So they're very much the garbage cleaners of the environment. They'll eat meat whether they've... They'll eat the meat whether it's been killed by them, whether another animal's killed them, whether it's died of disease, injury, poison, you name it, these guys will eat it. And they don't tend to mind whether it's recently been killed or died, or whether it's been a couple of weeks or even a couple of months. If they're hungry and they come upon a pile of bones, they will just munch on that as well. So they need the fur basically as roughage. So I'm not being mean by holding on to the meat here, guys. I'm basically joining in and becoming another devil, part of the feeding. But I'm not particularly hungry today, so they can have the large proportion of it.
Mum, boss one? The one down there.
So devils are actually solitary creatures, and usually in the wild they will live by themselves, although they do come together like this for a feed. Simply because it's more energy efficient to pull against each other, to pull the meat apart, than it is to try and eat it all by yourself. Who's going to win? The new girl or the older girl? It is a dilemma. You being cheeky. You being cheeky. No. No. She goes, the tail's the good bit. So in the wild, these guys are really struggling. They are thought to be extinct in the wild in the next 50 years. So the facial tumour disease is what's affecting them. It's really quite a nasty disease. It's basically a contagious cancer. Because there's a lot of lack of genetic diversity amongst the devils, they're able to pass this cancer along. And their immune systems aren't recognising it as a foreign body, so accepting it into the system, and it's causing quite a lot of damage. So it can remain dormant in a devil's system for up to 12 months before it physically manifests. Usually stress induces... Don't you bite me, Gil. Usually stress induces the bringing out of the tumour, so a lack of food, if they've got young in the pouch, that sort of body stress will bring it out. But if it hasn't come out before 12 months, then it will at that 12-month point, whether they like it or not. Sometimes it will just pop straight out. Not particularly hungry over there. So it'll basically get so large on the side of the face that the animal can no longer open and close their mouth. It'll start to actually degrade away the jawbone, so they won't actually be able to have any form of food whatsoever. Now these guys are gorge feeders and opportunistic feeders, so in the wild only feed once every 2 or 3 days as a maximum. So that does actually take them up to a month to starve to death. So it's really not a nice process whatsoever. There is no cure for the disease. There's nothing we can do about it. except put the animals out of their misery if they do have the tumour before it gets too bad. So it really is quite nasty. They've tried doing chemotherapy, radiation therapy, treatment, all of that sort of thing that we use on our own tumours and cancers, and it doesn't affect it at all. So it's very, very unique and very, very harsh. In being their natural behaviour is to socially feed like this, to give each other a bit of a nip when they're figuring out who's the dominant and who's going to breed with who. It's passed along really quite easily just from those natural behaviours. So it really is a bit unfortunate. But we're doing the best we can. All that we can do for these guys at the moment is to breed up as many as we can in captivity in case they do go extinct in the wild, and then hopefully we'll be able to repopulate the wild from there. It is looking like there may be other options that they may not go extinct. There are some devils that are a little bit more genetically diverse, have certain chromosomes which make them a little bit more genetically resistant to the disease. Their body seems to see it as a foreign cell and will attack it, but only for certain strains. The disease has mutated and progressed across the state, and there now are 14 different strains of the disease. So they're not resistant to all of them, but they are to some of them. So because of that, we're breeding those special devils up, trying to get as many of those as we can in captivity, as they're the only one thing that's got a bit of help for it at the moment. Because it can remain dormant in a devil system, as I mentioned, any devil we bring in for breeding, like devil, has to remain in quarantine for up to 12 months. If we could bring them straight in and breed from them, it makes life a lot easier. We could have quite a lot larger genetic gene pool for these guys in captivity. So scientists are working on a bit of a blood test for us, just so that we can test the animals as soon as we catch them up, and be able to know within a couple of weeks as the maximum whether they've got the tumour or not, and we can go from there. So hopefully they'll be able to help us out like that. But for the moment it's just a bit of wait and see and plan for the worst case scenario. But as you can see, they are very much beautiful, lovely animals. And being that they are these garbage cleaners of any meat that's diseased and poisoned in the wild, they are a very important part of the ecosystem. To remove these guys from the wild would mean there'd be a build-up of these carcasses laying around, which would increase the amount of diseases and stuff in all the other animal populations and reduce them quite significantly. So we do need to have them here in the wild, and hopefully they'll stay about. So they're white markings, guys. If you look at them, you'll notice that they're all quite different from one animal to the next. So devil's markings are a lot like a human fingerprint and completely unique to each individual animal. It isn't the reason they have them, so that I can identify them, but it does help. They mainly have these markings to help use them as a form of disguise. When they're running along at night time, it breaks up their body plan, makes them look like smaller animals. They're, as I mentioned, really quite shy creatures. So in the wild, they'll curl up over night time in long grass or underneath trees, and those white markings help them to blend in. It makes them look like they're part of the environment like that. So very good little way of doing things there. Their back legs are actually shorter than their front legs as well, guys, which gives them that funny loping sort of a run that they have, a rocking horse sort of effect. And it also means that when they get there, they're doing this tug of war over the food, that they can get their bottoms down closer to the ground, and it gives them a lot easier pulling force, a lot more pulling force there. But their jaw pressure per square inch is actually stronger than a crocodile's. So they do have a very tremendous jaw pressure. In saying that though, these guys, if they were to grab a hold of your leg, wouldn't be able to break the bone in your leg. They're not quite that good. But if they do grab a hold of feet and toes, even lower arm, then they can do the damage there.